Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 10 lies about homeschooling that you need to ignore. In my 8 years of homeschooling and blogging and just being around other people in the homeschool community, I have really come across some whoppers that are being perpetuated about homeschooled children or homeschooled parents that are usually being told by people who either have never homeschooled, have never been homeschooled, or have never even known anybody who was really homeschooled. So I really want to clear some of these things up today because a lot of these lies are so widespread that people actually believe that they're true. Like they just take it like you do, that the sun will rise tomorrow. Like they believe in it that much. And what I found is that these lies are actually keeping a lot of potential homeschooling parents from keeping their kids home with them, just because they believe these and they don't want these things to happen with their kids. And also, there are some new homeschooling parents who start hearing these things over and over, and they start to falter a little bit and second guess their decision to homeschool their kids. So I really want to bring these mistruths to the surface today so that we can go over them so that you can know that they are not true. Okay, so the first one is that homeschooled kids have to follow the exact same rules and laws that public school students do. This was actually brought to my attention last year. I wrote a homeschooling article for a parenting website, and somebody commented and just asked a question about homeschool laws, and someone else commented, and basically they believed that homeschoolers have to follow everything that public school kids do. They believe that since public school kids have to have standardized tests every year, so do homeschoolers. Basically, that if the kids go to school from 9 to 3, so do homeschoolers. They have to homeschool using, if not the same curriculum, at least learning the same sorts of things. And they also believe that you have to homeschool the same part of the year. And that is not true. There are so many different varieties of homeschool laws, and I did do a video on that the other week. What I will mainly tell you is, if you're not sure what it is, to check out hslda.org for your state. But what I'm going to tell you is that these homeschool laws generally look nothing at all like what public education laws do. They're just completely different things. And I also want to point out that cyber schooling is not homeschooling, not in the eyes of the law. So cyber schools are going to have different rules than homeschooling too. Cyber schools will generally follow more of a public school regulation, but that's because cyber schooling really is public school at home. It's not technically homeschooling. It is just public school at home. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that homeschoolers do not have to follow the same laws that public education does. They are two separate things. The second one is, I actually ran across this on a blog last night. The writer, she's against homeschooling. She referred to it as a plague, and she said more than once in her post that homeschool parents don't teach their kids how to read or write. And yeah, there are a lot of people out there who actually think this. It's amazing that people do think this, especially with the state that our schools are in nowadays. You know, we're pulling our kids out of school to give them a better education, but there are still people out there going around telling people that we're not teaching our kids how to read or write. So no, that's not true at all. And I actually have a personal experience with that. Before we moved into the house that we're in now, we used to have a neighbor who was older, and my younger kids, who were probably in like first or second grade at the time, well, they were my younger kids then. Now they're like my middle kids. But anyway, they were like first and second grade, and they would go out back in our yard, and they used to like to read out loud to each other. And the neighbor, he used to sit in his yard, so obviously he could hear my younger kids reading to each other, so he knew they knew how to read. Yet, when he saw my 12-year-old daughter outside the one day, he actually asked her if she knew how to read. And when she told him, yes, I know how to read, he went in his house, got a chapter book, brought it out and handed it to her, and told her that she should read it, and the next time he saw her, he was going to ask questions. She brought it in the house and handed it to me, and I threw it out. I was furious because, yes, people do believe that, but it is not true. So don't believe that if somebody says that to you. And this third one is actually linked to that. And this is that homeschooled parents do not teach their kids anything at all because they're too busy waiting for the rapture. I'm not even kidding. I read this on that same blog post last night as the one that says that kids can't read or write. And apparently, yeah, a lot of people think this. A lot of people think that we are not teaching our kids because we're waiting for the rapture. And I don't even know what to say about that one. It's not true. I mean, come on. Anyway, so the fourth one is that homeschooled kids don't learn right. And yeah, for some reason, people think this. A family friend actually said this to one of my daughters one time. She waited until I was not around, and then she mentioned to my daughter that homeschooled kids don't learn right, which I don't know if they mean because not all homeschoolers use textbooks and aren't sitting in a classroom. But the fact of the matter is that homeschooled kids really often learn better because they have their curriculum tailored to meet their needs. You know, kids who are in school, they have to do things a certain way. They all have to do things the same way because teachers just don't have the time nor the resources to tailor the education to meet each individual child when they've got 20, 30 kids in a classroom. So to say that homeschool kids don't learn right, I'm not really sure what they mean by that. Yes, they learn right, but the thing is that they're learning in a way that suits them best. So if you ask me, they're learning better. The fifth one that I've heard is homeschoolers are weird. And you know what? There are some weird homeschoolers, and there are some weird public schoolers. But what I do want to point out though is that you will find in the homeschooling community that since homeschooled kids do not have to stand up to, they don't have to deal with peer pressure of other kids telling them how they should dress or how they should act or what sorts of activities they should be doing. Homeschooled kids have the opportunity to actually be themselves, which looks different from society. So yeah, a lot of people might look at a homeschooled child who is busy being themselves and see that they are not following what all the other kids their age are doing. They might look at them as being weird when actually they're not being weird. They're actually being the individual that they are. So keep that in mind. And I also want to add that I mentioned how there are weird homeschoolers and weird public schoolers. And it's true. If you would go to the mall right now, if you would pick out like the person that you just thought looked totally weird and walk up to them and ask them what school they go to, chances are they would give you the name of a traditional school. You know, it's not like homeschoolers have the market on weirdness, but you know what? In a way, I embrace that weirdness because it shows that they have not fallen to what other people think they should be doing. The next one is that homeschoolers don't know how to interact with other people. I get that all the time, and I don't understand that. I think that there are a lot of these lies that I'm talking about today. A lot of people don't realize that they're lies. And when they say them, they've heard them so much that I don't even think they're thinking about what they say anymore to say that homeschoolers aren't interacting with people. Because I know that years ago, people didn't really know what homeschooling was, but it's pretty widespread nowadays. And I'm pretty sure that most people are aware that homeschoolers are not locked in their house 24 hours a day. They get outside. Homeschooled kids, they go with their parents to the store, to the bank, to the car dealership, and guess what? Homeschooled kids have neighbor kids who are their friends. So yeah, they're dealing with them every day, playing with them, interacting with them. And also older neighbors. We have a neighbor, her name is Mrs. Bowe. She's from Jamaica, and my kids love her. And they are always down there talking to her whenever she is outside gardening. So here are my kids outside talking to a woman who is in her 60s. So yes, homeschooled kids really do know how to interact. And I also want to point out that a few years ago, my church actually has a women's program every other month that women get together and, we eat together, and there's some sort of speaker. But we were sitting at a table with some elderly women, and my daughter, who was probably about 13, she just had this long conversation with the woman sitting next to her. And before we left, the woman said to me, "Your daughter speaks so well for someone her age." And I ended up mentioning that she was homeschooled, and she said, "I can tell." So there are some people who realize it, but I do want to let you know that homeschooled kids do know how to interact with people because they're usually doing it every single day. Okay, another one is that homeschoolers can't get into college. Again, this is another personal one to me because my daughter, the 13-year-old who's now 15, a few years before that, she was at her friend's house, and her friend's mother actually came up to her and told her that she was never going to be able to get into college because she was homeschooled. And my daughter was in like 4th grade at the time. So yeah, way to put something like that on a 4th grader. But that's what the woman actually said to her. And so my daughter came home all upset, and I had to explain to her, no, that is not the case. There are actually colleges out there who are looking for homeschoolers because homeschoolers know how to learn. They know how to find the information that they need, and they know how to go to set about doing what they're doing without having somebody tell them step by step every single thing that they need to do. Yes, homeschoolers get into college. I could give you a multitude of names of kids that I know who are homeschoolers and who are in college. So that's another lie. It is so not true. Now, this one actually, okay, here, well, first of all, I'll just tell you the lie. Homeschoolers must be hiding something. And I actually found this on the blog post that something just happened in my kitchen. The blog post that I was reading last night, the woman who said that homeschooling was a plague, she had a link to some sort of a coalition that is out there trying to get all of these really strict homeschool laws for homeschoolers across the country. They think that our laws are not strict enough, so they want to give these really strict homeschool laws because, in their words, well, not in their words, but let's just say a summary of what they were basically trying to say was that, why do homeschoolers want to have so much freedom with the law? Which I don't know how they didn't understand that we just want to be able to be in charge of our own children, which is how it should be. But what they were basically saying was that we must be hiding something. And then they were citing abuse cases and everything. And yes, you do hear of horrifying abuse cases of kids who have been homeschooled. But when you compare that to the amount of kids who are being abused, who go to public school, and not only by their parents, you have all over the news all the time these stories about teachers having inappropriate relationships with their students. You just had that one teacher go down to Florida with his high school student. You have sexual assaults going on in these schools, and bullying, and regular assaults. And you have people focusing on homeschoolers, yet I don't hear anyone really going out there and saying anything about all this stuff. When are we going to do the stuff about the public schools? Because that is where you see all of this. So no, we're not hiding anything. We just want the freedom to raise our children in the way that God intends us to do it. There are children. They are not the government's. And I think it's hard for people to understand that. You can tell that one really, really gets me. Okay, another one is that homeschoolers are lazy. Homeschool parents, I should say. Homeschool parents are lazy. And this one, I actually saw someone wrote somewhere that they think homeschool parents are just lazy because they don't want to get up in the morning and get their kids ready for school and put them on the bus. They're just lazy. Okay. I admit I'm not a morning person, but I think that getting my kids on a school bus really doesn't compare to taking care of them all day long, because you have to remember that, sure, we might get up later than kids who are in school, not much later. I'm still up around 8 o'clock every day, and my kids are up before that. Most of my kids anyway, not my teenagers. But anyway, getting your kids on a school bus, I mean, when you have your kids at home, your kids, you have all that extra food that is being eaten, all the extra preparation, all the extra cleaning, because you've got kids living in your house all the time. You don't have that time to clean up. You know, you're teaching your kids. I think they forget about that. You're teaching your kids. You're dealing with behavioral issues and character issues all day long, and you're not giving your kids off to someone else to help you do that. You're taking this responsibility for yourself. That is not lazy. That is an added responsibility. Another one is that, and this is the last one actually, is that homeschooled kids don't get to experience the real world. And that's another one kind of with interacting with people that I don't get, because homeschooled children, yes, they do get to interact in the real world. For example, my daughter is going to be graduating next week, my first homeschool graduate, and she spent most of this year working 20 to 30 hours a week, and she did her schoolwork beautifully, and she got to go to this job all the time, and she interacts with people. She gets awards for how well she does, and the people who work there, because she works during the day. She does not work at night when the other kids are there. She works during the day, and people tell her all the time, I can't believe how grown up you act. And it's because she is out there in the real world. She knows about responsibility. And so just as with the interaction, you know, kids who are being homeschooled, they're out there in the real world all the time. And like I mentioned earlier, with going to the store and the bank, those are all parts of the real world. Going to the creek, I always mention the creek, but that's because that's like one of our favorite things to do. But going to the creek that's the real world. It's not a textbook. It's you're actually out there doing the real thing. And kids who are in school, they're in a building all day long, reading about the real world, or watching videos or PowerPoints on the real world, or learning about it in textbooks. And that's not the real world. That's a simulation of the real world, and not a very good one, because on top of that, they're all put in classes with kids all the same age as they are, usually from the same neighborhood. And the real world isn't like that. When you are out and about or you have a job, you're working with people of all ages, all races, all sexes, all income levels. I mean, that is the real world, is variety. It's not the uniformity that you see in the schools. So if anyone was not getting a good taste of the real world, I would honestly have to say that it is kids in public school. Sure, they do after school, but homeschooled kids, they're doing it all the time. So yes, homeschoolers get a great taste of the real world. So I hope these explanations, I was trying to find a good enough word, I hope these explanations have helped you a bit. If you have been hesitating on homeschooling because of any of these subjects, you can leave me a comment, ask me some more questions that I can elaborate on something. But I just want to let you know that you really need to take all of these untruths with a grain of salt, because like I mentioned in the beginning, they are usually perpetuated by people who have never homeschooled and probably don't know anybody who has. And yeah, for some reason, there are people out there with a vendetta against homeschooling. So my advice to you is, if you have an honest question about homeschooling, ask somebody who actually does it. That's when you're going to get the correct answer. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and I hope you have a great day.